If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, part-time writer, full-time observer. As you can see, that is not Jack Hirsch. It's my buddy, Jim Kurtz from DKO Boxing Management. Jim and I have about a 30-year history. Jim is heavily involved in the game. He can talk any aspect of it. He's one of the more insightful guys I know talking about boxing. And again, we have a 30-year history and we've covered it all. We agree on a lot of things. Some things we don't. They're the ones he's wrong on. But we'll let Jim speak for himself tonight. How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, Frank. How's it going, man? Been a minute.
It has been a minute. You look good. I know you're doing well. Now, look, the format that I want to try to stick to tonight is you are heavily involved in the game. You have a couple fighters that are going to be fighting for titles this year.
Yes.
You managed Bruce Seldon at one point of his career. You know him well. You know the story behind that. And you're an insightful guy. You keep up with the game. But I figure what we would do is let's talk about the big fight that's happened this weekend between Boots and Stanios. And then we'll touch on your history, and then maybe the last couple of minutes, the anniversary of Hagler Hearns. It's 40 years tomorrow.
Amazing.
I don't even know if you were born yet, but it was a big night in my life. And here it is 40 years ago, and we're still talking about it. So, Jim, you saw the fight. I'm a big Boots guy. I think you are too. I've been on record. I think he's probably the best. Well, he's not a prospect now because he's a title holder, but I think he's probably one of the best young fighters in the game. And if I had a choice to get a piece of any fighter right now that's, getting near their prime, he'd be the guy I want. So give me your thoughts on the fight.
Well, Frank, Jaron Ennis has had a lot of hype for a while now. I've been able to be close to him being, in South Jersey. He trains out of Philadelphia. I know his brother.
And anything you can share that, we don't know about, please do.
Yeah, no, obviously everybody knows his father trains in Boise. He's a great guy. His two brothers fought. I've worked with Farah and Derek in the past. Known him for a long time, and I remember them saying, this kid's going to be special when he was younger on the way up. And, he's lived up to the hype, had a big amateur career, turned pro, in the Philadelphia scene, but he turned pro with a lot of fanfare, and he's lived up to every expectation along the way. I thought this past weekend was sort of a coming out party for him. He's passed every test put in front of him. He's passed most of them in a spectacular fashion. But you know how when guys start out and they come off and they begin their career undefeated, people always try to find something to nitpick and find out what they may or may not do right. And they want to stick with your. Stanionis was a tough guy. His last fight, I was pretty close to it because I am part manager of Gabriel Maestre. And Stanionis is a tough fighter. He keeps coming forward. And that style played perfectly into Boots' hands. But Boots did what you would expect a superstar to do in that platform.
Jim, Boots has everything.
Yes.
Not only can he switch hit, he's mean, he can punch, he can box, he's fast, he knows what punch to throw and when to throw it. It's amazing because I think Crawford is a generational fighter, Bud Crawford. And it's funny, Boots reminds me a lot of Bud, in that their style's the same. They're equally effective from both sides. They have explosive power. Boots might even be actually a little quicker, but I think Boots is the guy at 147. He'll beat Norman. He'll beat Barrios. I think his big fight, because let's face it, Jim, we both know he's never fighting Crawford. There's nothing for Crawford to gain. If Crawford beats Canelo, he probably retires or gives him a rematch. And if he loses, he retires. But we're never going to see that fight. So I think the big fight, maybe the Leonard Hearns type fight, is going to be probably Virgil Ortiz and Boots.
But Frank, when is the right time for that fight? As a fan, we want to see it next time out for both guys. But when that fight does
One
happen,
more fight for each guy.
okay,
High profile though.
when that fight does happen, you know, if the winner comes out and one or the other, which I would lean towards Boots, wins convincingly, what's ahead for them? I mean, I know that in a perfect world, we want these guys to get it on from jump. From the other perspective, you also want to percolate and marinate it. Although the boxing fans are drawn and can't wait to see Boots and Ortiz, is the casual fan not really yet? I still think there's a little more room for this to grow and become bigger.
All right, so it has to marinate a little bit more, and that's what I'm saying, Jim. You know what the problem is, and this frustrates the hell out of me because I'm an old man. But you know, boxing, it's not quite a niche sport, but it's almost there. And the problem is, there are people that will pay for good fights. And there's nothing better than a good fight, even better than an MMA fight. A great fight in boxing is still better. But Jim, they make it so damn hard with these streams and all these things. The older guys like me get confused and frustrated. I just wanted to be, I call the cable company, or I go there, I punch it in, and that's it. If it's a couple more dollars, I don't care. It's like I had to fight all night trying to find the right stream for the fight Saturday night. It's just frustrating because they're not going to bring in new fans, and old men like me are not going to be around in 20 years.
Well, Frank, for generations, networks helped create these stars and create the myths and the personas.
Exactly.
But now, with the platforms that you're speaking about, there's boxing out there. It's so difficult to find. You know, there's
exactly
basis Tuesday night fights, Friday night fights, where the guys can be developed, then graduate to HBO, then graduate to pay-per-view. Now, all of a sudden, if you get to the point where you're a pay-per-view level fighter, you know, you want people to buy the fights. A lot of the people in the past used to buy the fights because of name recognition. People nowadays may not know the names of today's superstars. And if they
and that's the problem.
And if they are told somebody's a superstar, they probably don't know who the person is they're fighting. So then they look at the records. And if they look at a guy who has 3 or 4 losses, the general mindset,
they write him off.
The guy's no good. And then they don't want to buy the fight. So a lot of it is to do with these platforms now. The streaming, look, every time something transitions, it takes a while for the mainstream to get used to it and become comfortable with it. The apps are here to stay. So the apps, if you watch, they're getting better and better and better. Apps are becoming,
and they're harder to pirate now too.
Yeah, so I do think that right now you're in a little bit of a transitional phase. I don't think it'll ever replace the way it used to be on television, but I do think there is room for growth on the apps. And I think there will be a platform down the road for some of these guys to become more developed and more mainstream.
Because but see, the thing is, Jim, back when I was watching fights in the late 60s and 70s, there were less options. Now, there are so many things on TV that you can watch from the comfort of your living room that it does make it better. That's why boxing has to deliver better fights. I mean, Boots is a generational fighter, I think. He's in the same weight class that Leonard was in. You know, Leonard and Hearns were fighting on TV for a couple of years and winning before that fight became, Stop the World. And the same thing with Duran.
No, I agree 100%. The one thing I do like that they did was bring the fights back to Atlantic City, which I'm sure we'll touch on. Atlantic City used to be a hotbed. Boots being from Philadelphia, I think that's a good idea to try to market him as a regional star. I know he's a national and international type fighter, but create a solid fan base in this area by having him fight in Atlantic City like they did. I think that was a big, kudos to the Atlantic City Sports Commission. And, I give Eddie Hearn and Matchroom the foresight for coming to Atlantic City for that. Boots has so much potential, but he's only scratching the surface on how big he can be as far as.
And he needs opponents. He needs the right opponents to bring it out of him, too. I'm going to deviate for a second, but as you know, I'm a huge Joe Frazier fan. Mm-hmm. And Joe Frazier was a swarmer and attacker. And in the history of the heavyweight division, there's only been 4. Tua could have been the 5th, but he didn't quite make it. But Dempsey, Marciano, Frazier, and Tyson. You know what I was noticing watching Stanionis fight? He also is a pressure guy and an attacker. But did you see how Boots basically, with a little side-to-side foot movement and a jab in his face, stymied the pressure? And Jim, to me, that's why I'm such a Frazier fan. And I think he was the best at that style, along with Duran. The fact is, Frazier took your jab away. None of these other guys do it. And when he fought like guys like Ali and Ellis and Mathis, he took their jab away. And at the same time he took their jab away, he was closing the distance and getting inside as he cut the ring off. Jim, nobody does that today. We're like, today, if you have an attacker and he's a pressure guy, a lot of them can't handle the guys that have feet that move, pick a side, and keep the jab in their face. And I was watching the fight the other night, and I'm thinking, man, that's what made Joe Frazier so great, is that he knew how to beat that style. And the thing he was vulnerable to is you had to hurt him before he got inside. Guys like Ali, Larry Holmes, Jimmy Ellis, they couldn't do it. It's just a side point that I noticed what made Frazier so good. But look, Staniotis fought a good fight. He has a good jab. He has a sneaky right hand, good left hook to the head or body. But at the end of the day, Jim, the other guy was just better and a level above. Would you agree?
I would agree 100%. And Ennis can do so many different things. You know, people look at him and he can be stylish. He can also go in there and bang. A lot of times when you see a guy who's stylish, who has great feet and great hands, maybe they don't like to engage as much per se in toe-to-toe. Boots welcomes it. Boots is willing to fight any style. He just fights the style of fight that is dictated by the guy in front of him. And he fought a perfect fight this past weekend against Stanionis.
What did you think of the corner stopping the fight when they did?
At that point, Stanionis had hit Boots with a couple good shots earlier in the fight. The punishment had been taken. I'm sure his shots at that point were losing steam. Boots was showing no signs of slowing down. I'm not opposed to the stoppage. At that point, if that round was 30 seconds longer, he probably would have been stopped. No sense to send him out for more unnecessary punishment. I know everybody, go out in your shield and all that. And Stanionis, I'm sure if it was his call, 100% would have went back out. But, in that division, especially.
And his face was getting pretty bruised up.
Yeah,
but it just amazes me. It just amazed me how like those 4 uppercuts to the body totally discouraged him, and that was pretty much it.
Well, and like we had spoke prior to come along briefly, we were talking about how Boots, switches up. He goes southpaw, he goes orthodox. There's not many guys that do it so effectively from both sides and do it with a purpose. You see guys who may switch and they do it where it don't make sense. They get caught in between. He actually, when he goes southpaw, he's doing it to set something up for when he goes back orthodox. And
that's exactly how he ended the fight.
Yes.
He pushed him back against the ropes with as an orthodox fighter. Then he threw a right, and then he got in position to set up the left uppercut from the southpaw stance. All right, look, we both like Boots. We both think he's the future. Who would you take if he fought Crawford tonight at 154?
I take Boots. Nothing against Crawford. I think Crawford's generational. I think Crawford is pound for pound right now until proven otherwise. I would still give him the benefit of the doubt. I know there's some other guys that can be definitely thrown into the mix. But I think Boots at this point, being a little bit younger, I think Boots would be willing to engage in a dogfight. It's crazy because both guys can do so many things, but neither guy is opposed to a fight. They both wouldn't, if they stood toe-to-toe, they would both enjoy that. So I think there's a couple different ways that fight could play out. I think the youth, and I think that Ennis is versatile. Crawford is as well, but I think the youth and being versatile, I think Ennis has a slight advantage now at this point.
There is 10 years between them. I would still go with Bud, but I wouldn't bet much money on it. Okay, now, tell me about DKO Boxing Management. How did it come to be? What's your role? And give me a little down the road look.
So, as you know, I've been involved in various aspects of the game for quite a while now.
You first start there. Tell us how you did, because that started with Selden, right?
Yeah. So back when we first actually crossed paths, I used to do a little local sports talk TV show and radio show. Got to meet a lot of people crossing paths, and that was when Bruce was a contender on his way up to fighting for the world title. Bruce and I became close. We had him on multiple times. After he fought Tyson, he retired for 7.5 years. When he came back, we had been in discussion. He asked me to manage him. So that was the first guy that I took on and managed. I managed him in his comeback.
Right.
And then, stayed involved ever since then. 4 years ago, David Dubinsky and myself, we came together and forged and formed DKO, which is a co-managerial, company. Dave and I are partners.
Dubinsky Kurtz?
Yes, DKO, TKO. Dave's fantastic. He has a lot of great connections throughout the sport. And together, we're able to, build a lot of relationships. I know everybody says that there's a lot of sharks and a lot of bad people. I understand that they're in every line of work. We try to do most of our stuff on relationship building because, your word is your bond, and there's a lot of people that you can't necessarily trust. So we've tried to form great relationships with all different promoters, all different matchmakers throughout to keep our guys busy. Right now, we currently have 11 guys actively fighting. Our one guy right now, Edward Vasquez, he's 17-2. He's going to be fighting Rafael Espinosa for the world title, May the 4th out in Vegas in the co-main event to Inoue out there at the T-Mobile Center on a Sunday night.
Will you be out there for that?
Oh, yeah, I'll be out there. Yes, sir.
When do you leave?
I'm going to leave April 30th. I'll be out there for 5 days. But I feel great. Edward deserves the shot. When we signed him, he was only 9-0. And, we moved him along. We had his first big opportunity. We made a fight with Eddie Hearn in Matchroom. We fight Raymond Ford, who was one of his top undefeated prospects. Went out to Phoenix, Arizona. We fought him, and we clearly beat Raymond Ford. We won 7 or 8 of the 10 rounds. And somehow we were on the wrong side of a split decision. You can Google it. A lot of it call it possibly the robbery of the year. Eddie Hearn, even afterwards, when he was interviewed by Chris Mannix, said Ray Ford got very lucky tonight. And that was a fight that we've been trying to make and run it back. We almost did it this past weekend. We were all kind of, come to terms where we were okay with doing the rematch with Raymond Ford. It was in, pretty deep negotiations. And then we had the opportunity to fight Rafael Espinosa for the WBO world title at featherweight. So obviously we moved on to that, to be the co-main event on the Inoue card. Edward's other loss, he fought Joe Cordina, who was another matchroom fighter, Eddie Hearn's guy, undefeated world champion. We moved up to 130 to fight him for that fight for the world title. Another, dog fight, man. Edward's a dog. Everybody, Cordina was a big favorite on paper going in, more known. Edward moving up. And, Edward won that fight. I mean, it was close. If it was a draw, it wouldn't have been egregious, but Edward won that fight 6-4. So in our eyes, he's the uncrowned champion. So to get this opportunity against Espinosa, we're excited. We feel it's long overdue. And, we hope on, May the 4th comes back and he's got the WBO belt wrapped around his waist.
Let me ask you this. How do you approach a guy on a fight that he won? Everybody that saw it knows he won, but he doesn't get the decision. What is the mind? How do you keep him up and keep him focused and not from getting discouraged?
Oh, I could see that happen 1,000 times. The one thing with Edward Vasquez, everybody talks highly of their people that they work with. He is the hardest working, straightest living, 24/7 boxing guy I've ever seen. Like, he won't let anything distract him. He used that as fire. It motivated him because, at that point, he came in, as the guy to fight Raymond Ford, and that was his coming out party, and he did nothing. He didn't disappoint. So although the judges may not have been in agreement out in Arizona, which I still don't understand to this day, but it also put that fight out there more where Edward got more recognition, and he came back against Joe Cordina and fought another great fight. So, he's never been handed anything easy. This kid works his tail off. And
now, what weight is he, Jim? Feather?
This is for the 120. This is for the featherweight world title. When he fought Joe Cordina, he moved up to 130 for that opportunity, but now he's coming back down to 126. So we're excited, man. And Espinosa is a great champion. 26-0, 22 knockouts, 6'1" featherweight. But Edward's got a style, and we're working on things, having a great camp, and we're really excited for the opportunity. We want to thank Top Rank. We want to thank everybody involved in making this happen. And we're really looking forward to putting on a great show.
Before you tell me about some of your other guys, let me ask you this. And you might not even want to answer it. Do you think that when there's a bad decision, the judges should be questioned and that they should have to make their case?
In that fight, absolutely. It was hard enough to get the master scorecards from the state of Arizona. We were trying because we were curious to see what rounds they could have possibly given Raymond Ford in that fight. There was a couple, but there was no way. The one judge had a 7-3 when it's 7. It was egregious. We couldn't even get a copy of the master scorecards.
Right.
Arizona's, not exactly one of your top commissions in the country. They do a good job, but it's not as easy to get through to some of the bigger commissions. So we tried, but we were never able to get a copy of it. But
that really bothers me.
It's the frustrating part. There's a guy who's fighting for his family. He's a great kid. You win that fight, it catapults you on the bigger things. And instead, you got to take a couple steps back and build yourself back up, and through his determination and work ethic, we got here very quick. And, like I said, we can't wait for the fight with Espinoza and, come out victorious and then see what lies ahead.
Sounds good. All right, what else you have going?
William Foster III. He's one of our guys. He just fought this past Saturday down in Maryland. He fought Benitez. It was a great fight. Foster is now 19-2. His two losses were to one was to Henry LeBron, who was undefeated, and the other one was to Erickson Garcia, who had one loss. Close fights. One was a majority decision. The other one was relatively close. But William is so talented, so skilled, and he's got a new trainer now, his brother Charles Foster, who was an excellent light heavyweight contender. So they've only been working together a few fights, and God, he really put it together this week. He looked tremendous. He won a WBA regional belt. He's ranked number 11 in the world by the WBA. Another guy
what weight?
130. Another guy who really wasn't did anything on the way up. His signature win up until this past weekend, he is the first guy to beat Edwin De Los Santos, as you know, who went on to fight Shakur Stevenson, and now he's going to be fighting Keyshawn Davis. De Los Santos, we fought him on ShowBox. De Los Santos was something like 13-0 with 12 knockouts. We went down there and we clearly ran right through. We won that fight clean. And, we're there. The LeBron fight didn't go our way, but this performance the other night, Saturday night with William, he's on the cusp of really getting another major opportunity, and can't wait. Really looking forward to it. He's an excellent fighter, unbelievably talented, and another great kid, clean liver, and works harder than anybody.
So it sounds to me that you're pretty confident. If I call you New Year's Eve to wish you Happy New Year, you could have a champ or at least a belt holder under your fold.
Oh, I totally believe it. I mean, I feel as though we should have one already, and we're looking forward. There's going to be the opportunity coming up shortly with Vasquez. Williams very close. Like I said, he's world rated. With the performance on Saturday night, he showed he's ready to compete at that level. And it's not like we have Gabriel Mastre, who just fought Stanionis before Stanionis fought Boots. A huge amateur career, got his pro career started late, lost a decision.
What did he do with Stanionis? What was the result?
He lost a decision. It was like
he went the distance though.
He went the distance.
Competitive? Because I didn't see it. Was he competitive?
It was competitive. Stanionis just down the stretch, he won the last 4 or 5 rounds. It was a clean win and a very well hard fought fight. And Mastre was supposed to fight 2 weeks ago against Nicholas Flaws in the WBA Eliminator, and Flaws got injured in training camp. So now we're looking to, get something for Mastre in his next fight. We have Tanjay Teasley, who's a undefeated welterweight from the Allentown area, 12-0. We have Jonathan Rodriguez, who's 17-3-1, a bantamweight contender. He's had some huge fights. We're looking to get him, a huge opportunity. Brittany Sims, our only female fighter that we have right now. She's 8-3, coming off an explosive first-round knockout. She's got a fight lined up in June. She's ranked number 1 in the world in the WBA in the women's bantamweight ranking. So big things are lying ahead for her. And we have 2 young up-and-comers. We have Julio Sanchez, who made his pro debut, Pleasantville. His dad, Julio Sr., was a fighter whose dad trained him. Julio trains his son, so it's the 3rd generation. And Julio also trains Bruce Selden Jr., heavyweight that we have. So it's nice to have a couple of those guys. Bruce Jr. is 5-0 with 4 knockouts.
Heavyweight.
That heavyweight looks like him physically, and we're excited. Julio
looks like his father.
He does look like his father. And Julio and Bruce will both be in action April 27th. It's a Sunday afternoon up in North Jersey, in Carteret.
Well, because of this seldom name, Jim, I'm interested. Tell me about Bruce. Is it Junior?
Bruce, Bruce Jr., yep.
How tall is he?
6 foot, weighs in around last fight he was 230, but he anywhere from 227 to 235, 238. Same build as his dad, unbelievably athletic. I know everybody thinks that his dad was this huge weightlifter. His dad was just naturally built like that.
We're going to save that. We're going to get to Bruce.
And Bruce is an unbelievable athlete. And
what is his forte, Jim, as far as stylistically? Is he a boxer? Is he a puncher? Is he a counter guy?
He's aggressive. He likes to come
or
forward.
He's still finding himself.
Yeah, he's still learning. He's 5-0, 4 knockouts. He had no amateurs. So, he's learning on the job. And he's very aggressive. But, each fight, you can see the development. He's becoming a little more and more patient. His last fight was actually a 53-second first-round knockout. But he showed patience. It wasn't something where he came out chaotic. Like a couple fights before that, he had a knockout early where he came out and just let his hands go crazy and got stopped. This fight was very calculated, set up some punches. And, hey, where the guys were putting in front of him, everybody presents a different challenge. He's got to go there. He's learning on the job, and he's passed every test, and he keeps getting better. That's all we can ask. Same with Julio Sanchez Jr. He made his debut last fight, went 4 rounds, won all 4 rounds. And, you know, in your pro debut going 4 rounds, the kid never breathed out his mouth once. So that gives us a good baseline. And another kid who works hard. He's in the gym every day with his dad. So, you know, I'm excited with the established pros that we have and, you know, the young up and comers. We also have Isaiah Wise, who's a middleweight. You know, he hasn't fought for a while. He's had a baby. You know, so there's guys out there, you know, and there's a lot of talent. So we're looking forward to what lies ahead.
Let me ask you this. And over the years, we've had these conversations countless times. And this is a sport that you can't do it because you're pretty good at it. You can't do it because you want to make a little money or you want some attention and be a minor celebrity. You have to eat, sleep, and drink it.
Well,
Do you see that in any of your guys?
Well, okay. I'm sorry to cut you off. You can participate in a sport with the mindset that you had said, but you won't get far. I know what you're saying.
Okay, right.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I mean, to be honest, we have people reaching out to us. Dave has a ton of connections. I have connections. We've done a great job, you know, I think networking, and we get fighters who reach out to us quite often, and we don't just go sign people to sign them. Like, we sign them because they're talented, but also they have to have that work ethic, be a good person, and train hard. I mean, have we missed opportunities with some fighters who were unbelievably talented? Probably, but if they weren't the type of person that you could really rely on day in and day out, you know, it's a risk a lot of people are willing to take. We aren't. We want to have the right kind of people in our stable, and fortunately we do. These guys all, and women, Brittany, all work their tails off, and they all come in great shape.
As you know, I've harped on this a lot, that there's only one thing the fighter controls: what he puts into it. Everything else, the judges, the scorecard, your management, or whatever there is, the only thing he has control of is on fight night. He can look across the ring and say to himself, I put more into this than you, and I'm more ready than you. I can't control the judges. I can't control the referee or anything like that. That's the only thing they have control of. And I think sometimes they don't realize that.
No, I agree 1,000%. And we tell our fighters that before every fight during training camp, exactly, almost verbatim what you said. You know, leading up to the fight, especially in the dressing room right before the fight, you know, obviously as a fighter yourself, you know, you have thoughts of what's going to happen. And, you know, like Tyson always says, there's the fear is like fire and anxiety. You always have different thoughts to go through your mind. But whatever you're feeling, the other guy's probably feeling as well. And they're probably feeling it worse because they're fighting you. And if you are in the best shape you can be, that's one thing you don't have to worry about. So you already have an advantage.
You're at ease there. You're at ease. Exactly. So and that takes so much pressure off a guy, because, and it's not like one of those things, Jim, where you and I could be scheduled to fight. I think I can handle you. I train, but I don't kill myself. Then we get in the ring, and after the first round, I realize you're better than I thought. It's too late then. It's not like I can turn it on then. It's too late. You have to have the mindset that everybody that you're going to fight is the next Tyson or Sugar Ray Leonard. Let me ask you this. Now, regarding the Seldins, you know Bruce, and what I know about Bruce is what you've conveyed to me. And Bruce did not eat and sleep boxing. Does Bruce Jr.?
Bruce Jr. has, yes. Having not an amateur career, it was something that he had to learn on the job, but he put in a solid 6 months of training to show us he wanted to do this before we entertained him really considering turning pro. So with no real carrot being dangled, he had to prove to us how bad he wanted to do this. And he goes to the gym once, sometimes twice a day. And he also does lessons at another gym. So he's constantly working out. He's constantly being physical. He knows he's naturally got some ability. Like I said, great athlete. He can really crack. He's got great legs. Got a lot to learn, but he's working hard. He's got a great trainer. I love his trainer, Julio Sanchez. And yes, the kid is really, really into it. This is what he wants to do. He's getting into the sport at a later age. He turned pro at 29. 20 years ago, that may have been a problem. I don't think being a 29-year-old
Not
heavyweight
today.
25 is that big of a deal. Because the majority of the heavyweight division now, it seems like, are in their upper 30s, and in 3 or 4 years, a lot of them are going to be gone, and there isn't really this next exciting new wave coming up. So I think he's in a good position as far as that goes. I think he sees some of the peers at his level of development where he is, and he can see what they do, watch him online, read stories, talk to people, spar with some of them, and knows that he has a real shot as long as he keeps the foot to the pedal to the ground. And, he's not done anything to dissuade us feeling as though that this kid's really into it for the long haul and for the right reasons.
Is there more pressure on him because of his father and who he was and some of the things that happened in his career? And is his father involved, and is he behind him?
I feel as
if
though...
you can answer it.
No, I feel as though, and I've explained this to him, at this level of your development, you bring in guys who are of similar development levels, and, they're guys that are brought in, you try to match them with guys where you can work on certain things to improve your, ability and move forward in your career. I told him, I go, a lot of the guys that are coming up, when they have their opponent come in, their opponent is fighting the guy in front of them. I said, Bruce, I go, when these guys sign to fight you, they're not going there saying, I'm trying
They're fighting
to
your father.
Junior. I'm trying to fight Bruce Seldon's kid. I said, and I go, so it's going to be a blessing and a curse. It will get you some more opportunities that other guys may not have. They may be expedited compared to what some other guys may have, but it's also going to have everybody want to come at you a little bit harder. As far as the aspect of more pressure on Bruce Jr. himself, I don't know if it's more pressure on him. The pressure's been being Bruce Seldon's kid his whole life. So it's not like it's something that just happened. He's been Bruce Seldon's kid his entire life, and going through high school and everything else, he's well aware of his dad's career. He's well aware of things his dad accomplished. He's well aware of the things that may not have worked out the way Bruce wanted to. And, he's been dealing with it his whole life. So that aspect of it is not new at all. His mom's a great support system. Bruce Sr. has been a very valuable asset to his son.
Nice.
They talk quite often. Bruce gives him great advice. And Bruce Jr. really, really takes that advice and runs with it because, number one, it's his father. And number two, I think he feels as though he's got a leg up on some people because a lot of people don't have access to that type of knowledge or experience that he has with his father. So his dad has been a very, very good asset in his career thus far as well.
There were a lot of myths about Bruce during his career, and one of them was that he was on this big weightlifting training program, and he was juicing and all this stuff. Tell us about Bruce, the way he trained, and about how natural he was as an athlete. And he was too lazy, basically, to lift weights because he didn't want to box all the time, right?
I never said that, but I'll put it this way.
I said that.
A lot of the armchair quarterbacks look at him and automatically, oh my God, this guy's juiced up, because that was right at the precipice of the steroid era and steroids becoming bigger in the sport and all the sports. Look, I'm not saying who did or who didn't in the past, but I'll tell you this, Bruce Seldon, absolutely not. I mean, there's no reason to defend him on that 30 years after the fact, especially when I wasn't his manager during that part of his career. But
right. You've always been close to him, and I know he's confided in you a lot, and you've been an influence to him.
He had unbelievable genetics. People go to training camp and lose weight. He would go to training camp and gain weight just from working out and hitting the bags, where guys are usually cutting. He was getting more ripped just from the workouts. You see guys who are muscle bound from lifting weights, and I'm not saying that any of these guys were on anything, but you've seen some heavyweights who look like Adonis, and they're slow, they're not fluid, they're not athletic, they're strong, they're plodding, they may be able to throw one shot, two punches, but they're not necessarily fluid or athletic looking. Bruce can still probably at damn near, what's he got, 60? Almost 60 years old, pushing almost. He can probably still two-hand dunk from a standstill at 6'1.5", 6'2". He was the best athlete I've ever seen. I saw him out in the tennis court running around, having never played before, going sideline to sideline. Jump in the pool, he could swim. I mean, if he would have put his mind to his studies in high school and played football, he probably would have went and been a Division I linebacker. And but some things happened along the way. Life got in the way, and ended up taking up boxing, and very good at it. I mean, one of the biggest I know people are going to take this and run with it however they want. A lot of people criticize him for his reign of heavyweight champion. I understand, everybody wants more, and people had their own opinions on the Tyson fight. People say that when they look at the list of least deserving heavyweight champions, different things like, a lot of people mention him because his reign was short. He had so much talent. I think he was one of the more gifted guys in that era. He was the guy that was forgotten when they came up because it was Bo, Mercer, Lennox, Michael Moore, Tommy Morrison, and Bruce. That was the next wave after Tyson, Holyfield, and George's comeback, Ruddock, and all them. But athletically and from a pure, ability standpoint, Bruce didn't take a backseat to many of them. Now, I'm not saying that translated well into all of his fights, but I'm just saying that, I think that a part of it is that he's underrated because people have certain preconceived feelings about how some of the fights went.
He had an unbelievable jab. I have been in the gym with him when he was working with Richie Cates.
Yeah.
And that was a big bag that he was hitting. And boy, he was jarring the building with that jab.
Oh, yeah. And I was probably pushing 40 years old at that point. So, no doubt about it. It's funny, just the eras. If he was turning pro in 2024, he'd be the biggest prospect you have coming up in the sport right now.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's amazing the way, just how generations and eras change, look, the greatest era ever was your era that you grew up in. I happen to be fortunate enough to grow up in the era with Bruce and Lennox, which is arguably the
90s.
Yeah. So, we got to see two of the best eras at, two of the primes of our fandom, per se. You hope there's another wave because although boxing, I think, is at a good point now with a lot of talent, you still want the heavyweights that can drive it because that's the boost that moves the needle. Being skilled and being tactical and being technical and doing a lot of things really good and being solid is great, and you can reign and make a lot of money and be a champion for a long time. People still want that excitement factor, and that's what drives the heavyweights.
Now, we've stayed in contact for 30 years, whatever, since 94, 95. But there have been some gaps where we didn't catch up with each other. What did you think of Joshua? Was there ever a time, Jim, that maybe like up until about 2015 that you thought this guy might be the next? Did you ever think that? Because I'll go first. And I was wrong. I actually thought he could be the next Lennox Lewis because he had the power, the size, he could box. We didn't know about his chin, but if you remember, when he fought Klitschko, he did something in that fight that Mike Tyson nor Lennox Lewis ever did, and that was get off the deck and win. So I think I may have overrated him a little bit then, but what did you think of him? Did you think that there was a chance he could be something?
I thought he was going to be heavyweight champion and reign for a long time and be the guy. He was the one guy who was coming up at a younger age, had everything lined up perfectly for a long and successful reign. And, once he got to that top level, when Andy Ruiz, that fight ever since then, it was, he became gun shy and he was a very good, he was a very complete offensive fighter for a heavyweight.
Great offensive fighter when he let his hands go.
Yep. And he's so hesitant to let his hands go now unless he's decidedly favored and don't feel threatened. It's a shame because I feel like we missed out on a lot of potential with Anthony Joshua. I was high on him, yes.
What did you think of Wilder at that time?
I thought before Joshua had gotten beaten, I thought Joshua would go right through Wilder. I thought Wilder had a puncher's chance. But like you said, you saw Joshua show some resolve in the Klitschko fight. And every other aspect of the fight going in at that point in time, you couldn't give Wilder anything that he had an advantage over Joshua in that fight at that point in time, except for one punch power. And Joshua's skill set, I thought, would be able to negate that. And I thought Joshua would torture him. And
they really did mess up. That was the Bo Lewis of that era, the fight that should have happened when they were both undefeated and had all the titles.
Well, Frank, now that we're talking heavyweights, I want to go back. I'm sure you've probably talked about it 1,000 times over the years on your show, but Tyson, Bo, Lewis, Holyfield. Obviously, if you wanted to rank them on the wholeness of their career, the order, you can kind of come up with a pretty solid order there, I would think, and there wouldn't be much disagreement. But on each of their individual best night, how would you rank them? Meaning I'm not holding a short rein against you because maybe you stopped training. Like that one night, you're like, wow, we're watching something special.
You know, Jim, that's really hard. I'll tell you why. Because I think at their best, Holyfield would always beat Tyson. But I also think at their best, Bo may beat Holyfield. Lewis, I'm not sure if he beats the best Tyson or the best Bo. But of those four, he had the best reign. So I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that. I mean, unless you
I always say, I debate that. And I mean, I think the Bo that fought Holyfield in the first fight would have beat all of those guys in the tournament. But his reign was so short-lived. You know, we got robbed of seeing Riddick Bowe because of, you know, him not being committed and fully married to the game once he made his money. You know, in the wholeness of their careers, obviously, Bowe's at the bottom, Tyson's right ahead of him, and then you can flip-flop Holyfield and Lewis however you want. I mean, that's pretty cut and dry, those four that way. But on that one particular night, I just think that Bowe...
The night he beat Holyfield, Jim, he was an all-time great.
Special. Yes, sir.
And, you know, it's funny. I sometimes think that may have been the best Holyfield too. He just happened to be in there with the best Bo that night because Holyfield was really good that night. And that 10th round, or was it the 11th round, when Bo had him hit him with the uppercut and almost knocked him across the ring. And by the end of the round, Holyfield was beating the hell out of Bo.
Yeah. No, that was such a great fight. And, you know, a lot of boxing people obviously knew Holyfield and knew how good he was, but there was still a lot of the Tyson fan base and Tyson fanboys out there back then. And I felt like the general public, a lot of people gave Holyfield more respect losing that fight than he had earned winning fights up to that point. Not the boxing.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair point. If there was an imaginary tournament, let's just say that the Martians came here and they brought their best Martian heavyweight boxer, and the planets were on the line, and we had to send one of those four guys out to meet that Martian boxer, and you knew he was going to be at his best. Who would you send?
I would have to send the Bo that fought Holyfield that one night. Just that one Bo. I wouldn't take Bo in any other fight over those guys necessarily, but that one night. I know he got Holyfield again, but I wouldn't take that one. It was only the Bo from the first fight. Because not only was he 6'5", and I'm not saying anything earth-shattering here, but for being that big of a guy, he could punch at distance and he could fight on the inside. I mean, he could
fight on the inside, had a good uppercut. He really, until he fought Galata, he showed a chin.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And, I mean, that was when you know, it all fell apart. If he would have fought Lennox right away or maybe after one defense, you know, then history may have changed a little bit, but you know, Dokes, Ferguson, you know, then he started gaining weight and then he didn't look so good. It was because
he put a kitchen in his bedroom.
Yeah. And then he started, you know, cutting. He was a heavyweight, cutting weight just to look good on the scales, but not because he was in great shape. And
exactly. Sort of like what James Toney did the last 10 years of his career.
Right. Yep.
What was I going to say? If Bo and Lewis, now you remember after that weekend, or in a 2-week span, Lewis stopped Ruddock and Bo took the title from Holyfield. And remember they had the altercation outside the ring after Bo beat Holyfield, and that looked like it was next. Who did you like then? Because I liked Bo at that time. That was before Emmanuel Stewart. I thought Bo was going to win.
I wasn't sold on Lewis at that point. Lewis surprised me the way he dismantled Ruddock. I didn't think that was going to go down that way at that point in time. And you know, Bo, after that fight, I thought Bo was going to be generational, and I thought Bo was going to, you know, reign for a long time. If they would have fought a year and a half later, Lewis would have beat him. Lewis, to me, was almost, as far as my acceptance and willingness to see how great he was, a little bit of Larry Holmes. The further along he went in his career, the more you appreciate
the better he looks.
And the further away you get from his career, he still even looks better. So, like,
Jim,
continues to climb lists. Lewis
if
continues to.
you had to say who's the best heavyweight for what they brought to the ring and what they achieved and their career, Lewis has probably had the best reign since Holmes.
Oh, I
Would you
agree. And I agree. I mean, how can you really? His 2 losses, he avenged. I mean,
He's 15-2-1 in title fights. He avenged them. And really, the one loss, look, I remember the Holyfield fight, the first one. We watched that together at your house. The fight that was a draw. And like, as much as I was rooting for Holyfield won 3 out of 12 rounds.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know what's even funnier? And I remember you had said this before, not so much about this generation, but you say things always look better looking back. Looking back now, Jim, some of the 80s heavyweights don't look as bad as they used to. And when you look at Holmes' reign, you think, you know what?
They're frustrating.
Those guys didn't suck.
Talented, man. I mean, just, they just didn't, as we've said multiple times, eat, sleep, and drink it. I mean, look at the talent. There was a lot of talent there. Just all those guys had an opportunity to step up and, really grab that era and make it their own. Nobody did. They just kept passing the baton. And, it's very simple to say, just like we always say, if you're the guy who's shouldered in between 2 great champions, or you're one of the 12 guys in that era who were shouldered between Ali and Tyson, you were never going to get enough respect either way, because you're never going to be able to follow Ali and Frazier's footsteps. And then as soon as when Tyson came along, Tyson's way better than any of you guys. So they were a generation that wasn't going to get their respect till after the fact. But there was a lot of talent in that generation. I mean, people forget, how good Tony Tucker was. They forget how good Pinklin Thomas was, how good Tony Tubbs was. I mean, I'm naming all the names. I can keep going.
Page, Dokes, Witherspoon.
Oh, yeah. Witherspoon, especially. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of very good fighters, and just not one of them was able to take that leap to become the man to define.
If you had to say right now, Jim, and I've kicked this around a lot, obviously Holmes and Tyson were the 2 elite heavyweights of the 80s. If you had to pick third, who would you go with? I would go with Witherspoon. I think based on what he brought to the ring, he did win the title twice, and he gave a near prime Holmes. I mean, he lost by a shade. I would say Witherspoon would be third.
Witherspoon definitely has an argument. There was a couple of fights that, Witherspoon completely underperformed. The one that I think gets overlooked a lot is Tony Tucker. And, he wasn't the most exciting guy, but God, he was talented. And, maybe I give him too much credit, but I still think, that is one of Tyson's 2 or 3 best wins when he fought.
But Jim, I used to think that, and I go back and I look at Tony Tucker's record. There's really nothing that stands out against other than the Douglas fight. And then he gave Tyson a good run, but that's another one where a guy makes a name off a loss.
And usually, the old mantra is you never trust a guy who makes his name off of a loss. But Tucker was able to maintain and stay, relative and relevant for quite a while, even though he came up short. Bruce beat him for the title. He fought Herbie Hyde. He fought a bunch of guys. But I just think that night, that Tucker back then, remember, Tucker was an Olympian until the boycott. Tucker had a big amateur career. He wasn't a guy who just happened to be on the scene, who was in the right place at the right time. Tucker was unbelievably talented. I think Tony Tucker could have been excellent. I like Tony Tubbs, too. I know Tubbs was frustrating because he never looked body beautiful, never looked in shape, but God, man, he was so.
Some people thought he beat Bo.
Yeah. Oh, I can see that. Tony Tubbs.
I saw Tubbs fight live as an amateur a few times. I was in the gym with him. He was very gifted. There's no doubt about that. All right, Jim, I want to hit a couple other things, but before I do that, I don't know if you know this, but I call Usyk the Bachelor because everybody loves him. He wins every fight on paper, all time. Some guy I saw Teddy Atlas has him 6th all time right now. What do you think of Usyk?
He's the undisputed best of this generation at this moment.
Clearly.
Would it be an earth-shattering shock if one of these guys beat him? One of these top guys? I mean, he does.
Give me the guy.
What's that?
Du Bois is not going to beat him. We know Joshua can't beat him. Fury can't beat him. I mean, who's out there?
I know you say Fury can't beat him. I know Fury's getting long in the tooth, but I also still think that, Fury, he was competitive enough. I mean, I still won't totally write him off. He's a guy who's been written off 3 or 4 times and always finds a way to pull a cat out of the hat.
Jim, he's done. He's done. That fight against Ngannou showed me everything. He should have been able to roll out of bed and knock the hell out of him, Jim. And he had life and death. I know he didn't train, but he should have had to train. And then Joshua showed what a decent pro could do to him. I think Fury, his career's over as far as elite. He abused his body with the drugs, alcohol, and food, and he was lazy.
Well, let me ask you this, and I think we're on the same page again with this, but, the era of super heavyweights, Usyk obviously is a heavyweight who's the size of guys who fought in the 70s. And
size of Ali, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts on these super heavyweights? I mean, do they have a shorter shelf life? What 230
I think Joshua showed that if you're bigger than Riddick Bowe, you're too big. I think there's a point of no return of being too big. And I think history's proved that. How many greats have there been over 6'5"?
No, that's a fair point. But I will also say that, you look in, taking over other sports, bigger guys every year are coming up and they're more and more athletic. So I do think that we will see some of that in boxing, and we've seen it a little bit. So just because somebody's 6'6" or 6'7", which wasn't seen as often back in the day, you see it in the other sports now where you see guys that are 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", who are unbelievably athletic, which wasn't seen 20 years ago. So
Jim, we're seeing guys in the NBA that are 7'5" now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'll tell you the guy that doesn't get much love, but I think historically he is a problem for everybody. And you're going to laugh when I say this because we've never discussed this before. Vitaly Klitschko is a nightmare for everybody. Style-wise, size, toughness, strength. I mean, give me the guy that beats him, that goes through him.
Okay. So you think Vitaly, and by what you said, I know you're going to answer, but you really think he would clearly beat his brother? Vladimir,
one time I didn't, but I do now, just based on the durability. Mm-hmm. I do.
Yeah, I mean, but there's a guy who, leverages his size. I mean, when I look at him, I never looked at him as being a guy who was unbelievably athletic in there, but he proved over time he was, because he looked, to me early on, he looked a little, he was so calculated. I wouldn't say necessarily mechanical, but he looked a little stiff. But
Jim, if Vitaly that fought Lennox Lewis was fighting today, he'd be the best heavyweight in the world.
Yeah.
I think he beat Usyk, he beat Fury, he beat Joshua.
Oh, now right today, absolutely. And so I think Vladimir in his prime today would be the best heavyweight in the world also. I mean, so
but Vladimir, you got to pick your spots with him, who you put him in with.
Who would you keep more?
Because he's vulnerable to some guys. Guys that come out, Jim, and let their hands go, even if they're not big punchers, he kind of goes in the holster and he don't open up or cut loose.
He wasn't always like that, though. I mean, that was very relevant. Very.
No, he didn't become like that till after Lehman Brewster.
Right. So
or Corey Sanders, I should say.
Corey Sanders got him early too. Yeah. So Lennox Lewis got upset and got knocked out by 2 guys that it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that he took lightly going into those fights. He did come
both
back.
Big, strong guys though that can hit.
Oh, no doubt. But because he fought them and cleaned up both of those fights, they're an asterisk on his career now. They're not a defining.
Right. He never met a guy he couldn't beat.
Right. Vladimir, because he had brother take care. He didn't fight Corey Sanders in a rematch. I just feel like Vladimir, his losses should have been handled differently. Like, he could have created even more of a legacy. He turned into being a guy who a lot of his legacy, ended up being longevity as well. I mean, he reigned
10 years.
Yeah. So, there is something to be said for longevity, but I do agree that you have to be a little more careful in picking his opponents than his brother's opponents. But I also think Vladimir was a much more talented and skilled fighter.
Oh, absolutely. And a bigger single shot puncher.
Yeah. Yep.
Vladimir's right hand is one of the biggest shots we've ever seen in the sport at heavyweight. All right, Jim.
Yes, sir.
Last couple minutes. Did I leave anything out you want to get about your company or your fighters?
No, I just appreciate, the opportunity to come on, discuss our guys a little bit. Again, if you get a chance, go on Pro Box TV, check out William Foster's fight this past Saturday. He looked tremendous. May the 4th.
And after your guy fights on the Inouye card, maybe we'll have you back.
Yeah, that's great. And then what they're doing on ESPN that night, if you aren't aware, it's a Sunday night they're fighting for the world title.
Right.
The Dodgers are playing the Braves in the MLB Game of the Week. So all the fans that are tuning in to watch Ohtani, as soon as that game's over, ESPN's going.
That's why they set that up.
In for the Inouye fight, yeah. So, and we have a lot of up and coming talent. We have, like I said, J. Teasley, we have Brittany Sims, we have Bruce Seldon Jr., Julio Sanchez, Jonathan Rodriguez. We have a lot of guys, and we're really excited, man. It's an exciting time to be part of DKO. Dave and I, have put a lot of time and effort, and we're really looking forward to what we have ahead. And like I said, I can't thank my partner Dave enough.
Well, Jim, I don't know Dave, but I know if you sign on for him, he must be a good guy, because I know you're a good guy, and nobody deserves success more than you do. And I hope that you get it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Frank.
All right, real quick, Jim. Hagler Hearns 40 years ago tomorrow. First round, the best round you ever saw?
It's right there. Yeah, we talked about another one of my favorite rounds, the 10th round of Holyfield Bowe, but that first round was unbelievable. Do
you remember who you picked going into that fight?
I just thought Hagler's consistency. Hearns was scary, but I just thought Hagler did everything really good. There wasn't a weakness, and there were a couple flaws in Hearns's style per se, but God, Hearns was such a scary puncher, and that was just such an exciting fight. Hagler wouldn't be deterred.
Jim, it's funny. You set me up. First of all, when Hagler couldn't dent Duran and Hearns put him away, I started to question what I thought. But real quick story. At that time, I was a stockbroker, and my boss was a big boxing fan. He loved punchers. We went back and forth about who was going to win the fight so we could bet on it. And I knew he liked Hearns, and I wasn't sure that I didn't like Hearns.
Really?
So Friday before the fight, he says, "You ready to make a bet?" I said, "You know what, Jack? I'm really not sure who I like." I said, "Let me sit on it this weekend." And I said, "I'll come back Monday morning and, I may pick Hagler and then we'll have a bet." So he says, "Okay." So Monday morning, I'm getting ready for work. I'm getting dressed, and Good Morning America is on TV. And David Hartman was interviewing Hagler, and Hagler is going through the routine. This is war, destruct and destroy. I get no respect. This is my legacy. I'm going to make sure everybody remembers this fight. All the stuff we heard. So at the end of the interview, Hartman's about to let Hagler go. And before he goes, Hagler goes, "Just one more thing." The guy goes, "What's that, Marvin?" Hagler stands up and has the one belt around his waist, one this way, one that way. And he looked in the camera. He says, "There's no way Tommy Hearns, or there's no way I'm not leaving the ring tonight with these belts." And the way he said it, I knew at that point, I'm betting on Hagler. So I go into the office and I said to my boss, first thing Monday morning, the night of the morning of the fight, I said, "Jack," I said, "I was on the fence all weekend." I said, "I just saw Marvin Hagler on Good Morning America, and the way he looked in the camera and said, 'There's no way he's leaving the ring tonight without those belts,' he convinced me, and I believe him." And I bet on Hagler. Then the next morning he walks in, calls me in the office, hands me two $100 bills, said, "Great fight. We talked about it all day, and here we are, 40 years later, still talking about it."
Oh, it's an all-timer, man. It never ages. You can watch
Jim, real quick, think if now he didn't win the fight and he didn't deserve the decision, but just think if he would have won a decision, what his legacy would be today.
Oh, without question. It's the legacy's already, immortal. But
he's top 3 as it is. Yeah. If he gets that decision, he he might be one.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree.
Nothing like him. Okay, that's about it. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next week. Jim Kurtz, DKO Boxing Productions. There it is right there. And we're going to have Jim back on, and we're going to follow his guys. Thanks for watching, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Frank. See you all.
Wait a second.